Welcome back. My name is Hector Flores, and this is the Projection Podcast. I am your host, and today we got Dr. Blakely. Dr. Blakely, how you doing?
I'm doing well this morning, Hector. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. I know during this time, it's real tough to come in and get away from work and your kids and everything else that's going on. So thank you very much for being with us today.
I'm happy to be here.
So Dr. Blakely, you are a counseling and a sports psychologist, obviously. Let's kind of get right into it as far as what you're doing now. Let's kind of revert back into kind of growing up. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about where you're from, where you went to high school, and some of the sports you played growing up.
Sure. So I am San Antonio born, and actually not born. I've been here since I was 3. So grew up in San Antonio. My parents actually still live in the same house since I was 5. So it's kind of nice to have roots here. I grew up playing soccer most of my life. I went to Alamo Heights High School. I dabbled in like middle school basketball and volleyball for a little bit, but I actually, even though I'm tall now, I grew very, very late. So I was always the kid holding the ball in like the front row in the very center.
Right. I'm sure your mom has those pictures back.
Oh, yes. We definitely still have those pictures. And my mom was actually, didn't want me to play varsity soccer my freshman year because she worried I was going to be too small.
Really?
Yes. So kind of funny looking back, but I mainly specialized in soccer early on. I did a little bit of track as well, but played soccer at high school, played club, and that took up most of my time, and just had a fun run. Alamo Heights, we got to go to our first state tournament my senior year, and I was the San Antonio Express News Player of the Year that year.
Really?
So, yeah, it was a fun ride.
That's a good accomplishment there.
Yeah, thank you.
So after Alamo Heights, did you end up going to play soccer?
I did. I committed to play soccer at Davidson College.
Oh, okay.
Everybody always asks, did you know Steph Curry? Yes, he was in my class year. He's an acquaintance. I couldn't call him up today, but Davidson is a small school. So at the time I was there, it was probably around 1,700 undergrads.
So when he was there, y'all went in the same time?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he lived under me my sophomore year.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was fun. I was part of that tournament run where we had a board of trustees, like several members, charter several buses for Davidson kids to go up and put us up in hotels so we could get to be part of that experience.
And where exactly is Davidson at?
Davidson is a little north of Charlotte.
Okay.
So out on Lake Norman kind of area. It's maybe about 30-ish minutes away from Charlotte, and it's a beautiful area of the country.
So you were there for 4 years?
Was there for 4 years. Played soccer my kind of whole way through. And then it kind of was a mix. It was a mix transitioning to college. Soccer people will appreciate this. I was a forward in high school, and they made me play out in the right wing in my first year of college, so lots more running. It's kind of a different deal. But I enjoyed playing there. It was not without difficulties and kind of a grind.
Yeah.
But then my senior year, again, we had a fun experience where we won our conference tournament and got our program's first berth to the NCAA tournament. So is kind of going back to, like, I know because, like, with baseball and soccer, like baseball, it's really hard as a freshman to go in and adapt to that play because it's so fast. Yes.
Is it kind of like that in soccer as well?
I would say
or
so.
Or what would be kind of the difference?
It's I think what's interesting about soccer, too, is it's a fall sport. So you report for preseason, and then in a few weeks you're already playing games, right? So there's not much of a time for development or getting your bearings or
preparation in general.
Yeah, so it's different. You're learning this coach. You're learning a whole new team. And so it's just, I think, a lot to manage. And then it is a different level of play, a different pace. So kind of trying to figure out, like, what are my strengths? What can I contribute?
Right.
And it's different for many players coming in. You don't always get all the minutes that you were getting as you graduated from high school or club team program. Mm-hmm.
It's a big difference from being it in high school. Yes. And then you're like, wow, everybody's good as I am, or not better.
Yes.
And you got to adapt to that.
Yes.
So what did you study when you were at Davidson?
I actually did study psychology. I started out pre-med and then figured out that medicine was not the path I wanted to follow because I really enjoyed engaging with people. And it seemed more and more, from my perspective, physicians weren't getting that one-on-one time with patience as much. And then I took a couple psychology courses and was just fascinated with why people do some of the things that they do, and sometimes behaviors that may not make sense on the surface.
Right.
So was wanting to just understand that better and just engage with people.
So it was during that time where you're like, I'm going this route.
Yes. I decided right in probably my junior or senior year that I wanted to pursue a PhD in psychology. So my last season, I was actually studying like vocabulary cards on bus trips and taking the GRE one weekend. I had to get permission to leave like a Saturday practice to go do that. And
It's a process, right?
It's a process. It was a process. So I was actually talking with a young man who's over at St. Mary's who's applying to some programs right now. So they're in their postseason run, and he was asking for advice, and it took me back to remembering what that was like to be preparing for the next thing and trying to be in the moment.
Right. So like kind of referring back to like your childhood, was your parents kind of real pushy in what you wanted to do as far as in sports, or they're just more like, hey, it's your life, do what you want to do, and we'll support you?
My parents were great about not being pushy with athletics. So they both had athletic backgrounds. My dad was a tennis player, played at Princeton.
Okay.
My mom she swam in some in high school. She was a cheerleader her first year at Vanderbilt. They just kind of both did athletic things. But they never forced us to play their sport. We were encouraged to participate in sport, and I did. All my siblings did. But I never felt like it was something I needed to do for them.
Well, if you played the game and, if you've had some experience in sports, like, it's good that you have parents that kind of pull back and just try to guide you in the right direction versus hammering you, right? Because I know it happens a lot with youth.
Yes, I have parents sometimes, not so much recently since I've been in this position, but when I would come back and I was still known as a soccer player in the community, parents would ask, like, what else does my child need to be doing? It's like, let them enjoy it. If they don't have fun with what they're doing, you're not going to see that like kind of long-term sustainable connection to sport. And so I think we lose sight of that sometimes, trying to get the edge. And of course, we would want to provide our children every opportunity. And there's a balance, making sure that the motivation's still coming from within. Because we see when you look at the research, that internal motivation is so much stronger than external forces from parents or pleasing someone else or like a scholarship or whatever it may be. Yeah.
So like, as far as like you talking to many people, when was the first time you actually encountered kind of being out and helping someone and guiding them and obviously in psychology? Were you in college when you got that opportunity?
Like to work with somebody?
To work with someone?
No, in college I got to be involved in some research opportunities, so not so much in a clinical sense. It wouldn't have been until my grad program that I was in more of that therapist role with a client. Because
I feel like whenever you're kind of going and you hear things, you're like, oh, wow, it's because there's a lot of stuff that happens out there behind closed doors. And, and I'm sure it's like you hear for the first time, it's like, oh, wow. Well, what else is going on here that I need to know or to be prepared for it, because you're dealing with a lot.
Yes.
All right, so now you're at the stage where you're at. Talk to us a little bit about Train the Mind.
Sure. So coming back to San Antonio, this is the first time in my career I've pivoted into private practice and just wanted to pursue the flexibility that offers. And I connected with Chris Dial, who is the men's basketball coach over at OLU.
Okay.
I happened to see him out at dinner one night, and he was wearing his gear, and I was like, I already know what time that is, having worked in athletics. So I was like, it's here from a practice, didn't have time to change, like, I'm going to let him be. Yeah. Even though it would probably be a good connection for me to make. And then, as chances have it, I ran into him the next day at daycare. We had kids at the same daycare at the time.
Oh, okay.
And so told him what I did, and we got coffee, and he was the one who connected me to DJ Gracia over at Train the Mind. And Train the Mind is a company here that they are basically, the mission's to provide like mental skills for athletes, but that benefit them on the field and off. So really looking at a preventative approach of, this is valuable information, and how do we make this accessible to more people? Because the cool thing is when you can do this with younger kids or preteens, it has the potential to change the trajectory of how they cope and deal with things that can benefit them, as opposed to trying to learn it at 40, 50 later in life.
Right.
And our young people need it. We're seeing that more and more. They're asking for it.
So I think I saw it on the newspaper, right? Was it on the newspaper?
What was?
With the Our Lady of the Lake deal. They had like a big, I guess it was like a big event that the Train the Mind was.
They probably did. That probably predated when I was here.
Right.
So I, kind of back to Train the Mind, I met DJ and we were just chatting, and he was saying that in addition to some of the videos they offer through his platform online, they wanted to be able to provide some like speakers or like essentially sports psychologists to go out and engage and do this on the field, on the ground work with different teams. And so that's how we connected. And again, it's a small world. I played at Alma Heights High School for Chris Sharp, and he is still coaching there currently.
Wow.
And DJ's daughter, Anna, just graduated last year, and Sharpie, my coach, asked me to come and be the end-of-year speaker at the banquet that the players had.
Oh, okay.
So DJ was there for his daughter and got to see me speak, and then he was like, "Okay, let's do this. Like this is going to be a fit."
Well, I think like coming from an ex-athlete perspective, it's cool to hear stories like that, because it's like, wow, like she knows what I'm going through.
Yes.
Right? Or these people know what I'm going through. It's like you can't really talk to anybody else out there like that. You know?
It can be hard. And that's true for therapy. Like, you don't have to have lived someone's exact experience to be able to connect or understand what they're going through. And there's something that feels very relatable when someone may have experienced something similar to what you're going through.
Yeah.
And I find that's very true in athlete culture and sport culture, especially at the high levels. People really appreciate if you are going to work with them in a clinical sense or performance sense, that you've engaged in those areas and know some of the pressures and demands, because I think sometimes from an outside perspective, we see the highlights, right? The glamour, the things that look really attractive about getting to be like a high-level college or pro athlete, and it's harder to see the things behind the scenes that make that life difficult.
Because as a college athlete, you're putting in so many hours and time, and then you're going to school, and you're trying to please people, your parents, your coaches, your friends.
Yes.
And if you don't get it done, it can be heartbreaking.
There's a lot of expectation. There's a lot of pressure. The time demands on these college student athletes is pretty exceptional. And so I talk to them a lot about, like, okay, you get to be Johnny the athlete and Johnny the student. When are you just Johnny? And they're like, I don't have time for that.
Yeah.
Well, that's an issue. Like, how are we going to help you figure that out?
So is it as far as for being an athlete, is it good to kind of rear back and be yourself and not necessarily the athlete that you're being 24/7? Is that kind of, you got to find some balance and be a kid again, or be a friend, be a brother.
Yes.
And not necessarily just focus on one thing, but it's okay to go back into being a normal person, pretty much.
So I keep looking at your notepad, because when I work with people, I always keep one and just draw things as we're talking. And the thing that comes to mind, just to represent the answer to that question, is a pie chart. Mm-hmm. If we have all of our identity tied up in ourselves as the performer, as the athlete, if something challenging comes up, if we go through a slump, if we are not performing the way that we want to, all of our identity rests in that one kind of sector of our life. And typically it feels like if things aren't going right in baseball, then nothing's going right. It has the potential to really impact us in kind of more like heavy and lasting ways than it needs to, compared to if we are balanced in our connection to other aspects of our identity, ourselves as, like you were saying, like as a person in a family, or someone who enjoys a hobby, or someone who kind of gives back in a certain way. So it can be very helpful to make sure that we're not putting all of our eggs in one basket.
So is it good to like take time away from your sport?
Yes. And it doesn't have to be like grandiose, because I feel like a lot of athletes hear that and they're like, I just don't have time for that.
Right.
It really can be like 20-minute pockets of time where you're allowing yourself to like step away, be a person, do something else you want to do. There's been some fantastic articles out lately in kind of the pro golf world about golfers saying, I've got to take some time away and do other things. They go fish, they go do something with their family. And it's really helpful that people are speaking out about that, because for the longest time, especially in the sport world, we've had this grind harder mentality. And what we see is there are diminishing returns at a certain point where grinding harder is not serving you anymore. We see more burnout. We see that it's not productive work that we're putting in. We see well-being decrease. None of these things are conducive to our best performances. And so I'm glad that we're starting to call out that culture a little bit. Steve Magnus has just had a book come out called Do Hard Things, and it really looks at the past culture of what toughness is, and then what does the research actually say toughness is about. And it's helpful because we're looking at things that sometimes I think were just generally accepted and we didn't scrutinize them. And now we're taking a look and saying, hold on a second, that work harder, rub dirt on it, like don't feel pain, no bad days, whatever. You see those posters in like athletic departments, right? Not as much anymore because we're working on that, but that stuff doesn't actually work.
Interesting. Because I would see a lot. You're right, because I would see a lot of that. Yeah. When I was kind of growing up, and you're okay, just shake it off, get in there again. But there's so much behind it, right? Because the game has changed. Yes. In every sport, now you got social media. You got, I feel like now there's so many people playing sports, and everybody has this one goal, and it's probably less than a percentage to actually make it. Right. So you have to be able to understand that in the back of your head, like, hey, this is what I want. But at the end of the day, if I don't get there, it's okay.
Yes. I think kind of what comes to mind for me when you say that is it's fine to pursue that goal. It's fine to pursue wanting to play at the highest level. And like you said, if that's your whole reason for putting in the time, there's a lot of the process that we have to go through that we're not connecting to, and it's harder to enjoy points along the way, like connection with teammates or like mastering a skill or the satisfaction of having worked really hard. Those things are also very worthwhile pursuits where if we can make sure we're connecting to those pieces along the way, our whole experience isn't defined by that kind of 1% chance of something happening.
Yeah. Like for youth, do you think it's good for youth kids to play, for example, like baseball? You think it's good for them to play year round? Or is it something you kind of have to read and see how they're going about, if they're already enjoying it, if they're taking it serious, if they're smiling and happy, or what are your suggestions on that?
These are hard questions because...
Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot here.
No, please don't. This is the good stuff. This is where it's at. I saw a tweet the other day that was looking at, and soccer is my background, so I'll talk about this, but they were saying, okay, high school season just ended. When does club season start? Now. Oh, okay, when does club season end? When high school season starts. And the person said, the system's broken. So if there's no time off and we're going year round, like what is the demand that we're putting in where, again, our kids are getting time to rest and recover. They have opportunities to be kids. They get to kind of connect with other things as they're figuring out who they are in the world. Going year-round is a tall ask, and I think we're also seeing research, too, that diversifying in sports actually does serve our kids. I think there was a line of thinking for a while that we need to specialize early and only do that sport, and we're seeing that that's actually not the case in terms of what leads to success at the higher levels.
Yeah, not only that, if they do something different, it might help them out in the long run. Like you said, you find a new skill, you find a new love. Yes. Because there's many things you can do out there that.
Absolutely. And a lot of times, young people don't know what they want to do.
No, they don't. Yeah.
They need time to figure it out and discover it. Like there's I don't know exactly what the statistic is, but looking at undergrads, they change majors or career fields multiple times. Most people do. And so instead of having to know exactly what you want to do right when you start college, like it's okay to take some time to figure it out. Right. So if we're talking about college kids, imagine youth sports, right?
Yeah. I could only imagine that. Yeah. Being a kid. Well, because you're a kid. You necessarily don't know.
And if you specialize early, like you said, you've never had an opportunity to engage or try something else and see if you like it or not. Yeah. So, yes, there is a reality that you do need to put in time and work and to develop skills to be able to play at a high level, but it may not be quite as early in life as maybe we're pressuring some of our kids to do these days.
I had a parent that kind of reached out, and she's like, well, my son doesn't play, college baseball. Like, what is all this good for? I said, well, people don't understand that sports makes you who you are. You build some character. You build discipline. Yes. Like, whether you're going to play at that level or not, you're going to be a better individual by being around teammates and good people and knowing teamwork. it's going to make you a far better person and learn some things a lot quicker than, you know, the average Joe just kind of going through the motion, not really being out there and involved.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That was something I touched on in the end of year banquet speech I was talking to you about with the high school soccer team. And there's research out there that says that over 90% of C-suite women, so women holding like CEO, COO, CFO jobs, have participated in sport. That's not a coincidence, right? That's a really high kind of number that you see there. And it's to your point of you're learning how to be assertive, how to take up space, how to work with people, how to persevere at something. There's so many things that translate from sport into life that I think sometimes we overlook.
Yeah. So like going back to like the sports aspect, as far as confidence, right? Because confidence is something you need in sports to be able to perform at an elite level. How would you be able to build confidence as a player? What are some suggestions you can give to some players that are going through that phase and like, I need some confidence? Well, how do you build confidence, right?
And I love that you set the question up that way, because sometimes people look at confidence as like you have it or you don't.
Yeah.
And that's not helpful for one, and it's not true either. Confidence is absolutely like a skill that you can work on and build and develop. And it's one of the major topics I'm asked to address when I come in and work with the new team. Part of what sets you up essentially to build confidence is needing to make sure that when you are reflecting on your play, reflecting on kind of what you're doing, that we're taking a look at like, where are my thoughts going? So many of us, especially when we want to play at a high level, spend so much time trying to get 1% better. Right? And when we do that, we're often looking at our play through more of like a critical lens. What do I need to change? What am I not doing well? What's the area in my game that I need to improve? And we absolutely need that. We need that mindset to take a look at, again, how do I keep pushing myself to the next level? But the catch is, if we spend all our time in that kind of thinking, what does that end up telling us, right? We are really only looking at where are we deficient, or where do I need to get better than I am, rather than making sure that we're spending time on what did I do really well in training today? With my intention in terms of how I set out to play, did I accomplish that thing? What is it in terms of my shooting or my at-bats that I can replicate that will help me to be more successful? And so that's one of the major things I encourage athletes to do, youth, high school, college, even pros, is making sure they're taking a look at like, what is the balance between those kinds of thoughts? And a lot of us, when we're not feeling confident, need to spend extra time developing the ability to check in and review, like, what did I do well today? And being specific. It's not, I just got lucky and I got lucky and all my serves went in. It's, no, what did I do with my process or my setup or my mindset, my technique that allowed me to be successful in this way? So we're taking ownership over the things that we're doing well.
So is it pretty much like not looking at the big picture and all, but taking those little initiatives to kind of get there, in a way?
I think it's breaking that down, but just not losing touch with, like, I am good at what I do.
Yeah.
There are things that I did well today.
Yeah.
And when we review that, it's really cool when you see an athlete's face when they start kind of talking about it in detail, because, and I'll come back to this, but they have almost like an aha moment, and there's something they can hold on to that helps them feel more confident as they're going out there, because it's like, no matter what's going on with this other skill today, I know I can take care of my process. I know I can contribute to the team with my defense. I know, like, I've got this. We have almost a stronger foundation of identity in terms of what we do contribute as an athlete, and that does help with confidence for sure.
That's very, very interesting.
I'm glad you like that.
Yeah.
All right, here's the point I wanted to come back to, okay? This is something I love working on with girls and with women, because oftentimes girls are socialized not to speak up about what they do well. And I used to teach personality psychology when I was a TA in grad school to undergrads. And there was some research in there that showed when women were asked to judge like how they were going to perform on a task, when they did it privately, they would score themselves decently. But when they knew they were going to have to share in public, they reduced their score. So if I have to share with other people how I think I'm going to do, I'm going to almost diminish my accomplishment because it's more acceptable. People are less threatened by that, whatever it may be, right? I love knowing that, because I really work with both women and men, but especially young girls, to say it's okay to be confident. It's okay to take up space and to be proud of what you're doing. And let's practice the skill early, because that will serve them through their life. Different, right?
It's crazy how, you know, a female and a male, it's kind of totally two different mindsets, I would say.
It can be.
Yeah.
It can be. I wonder if, Hector, you can even speak to, from like your baseball background, I would imagine kind of men are more encouraged to do that, or to kind of take up the space and own what they're doing. It can be different in those locker rooms.
Yeah. A lot goes on.
Yes. Yes. And men get other messages. There's things specifically I have to work on with men, especially kind of more around emotion regulation and expression and things, where I feel like they're not set up for success with the messages we send them socially, culturally.
Yeah.
So we all have our unique challenges, certainly. But again, having that awareness and that self-knowledge gives us an opportunity to do something different.
Right. And you said it, awareness and self-knowledge. If you don't have that, then it's going to be very, very hard for you to follow that procedure. You can't.
Yeah.
You know, that's why people that's why people like you are, you know, it's helpful and it's guidance, because you can get lost in it.
Yes.
And if you know how to go about it, it's going to make you better in the long run.
Yes. People, I think a common misconception in talking to a psychologist is that you go to them for advice. And that's not the case. I would say it's more common that we are trying to serve as a mirror for you so you can see yourself more fully. Right?
Yeah.
So it's not so much here's what we think you should do, but creating a space where you can kind of understand yourself in a different way, and maybe kind of connect some dots that didn't feel like they went together before.
Yeah. And I got a buddy, and we kind of, you know, I'm not kind of like a mind freak. I like how the mind works, because it's,
me too.
It's for him, it's and he's actually an attorney, and I grew up with him, and he's like, dude, the mind is the most powerful thing in your body. Like, if you can control that, you can do anything you want. Like, it's just so, you know, like, and every time we hit like a downfall, he'll send me a text or like, hey, remember, the mind is the most powerful. You control that, you're good. Don't worry about anything else. It's so, but it's so true. It's so true. And I'm like, man, that's a powerful thing to say when you're going through, you know, things like, how do I control this so I can perform either hitting or, you know, a test or whatever is going on. I mean, it's not even only sports. It's beyond sports. It's life.
Yes, sport is a microcosm of life. Absolutely. Yeah. So what we see in sport shows up off the field too.
Exactly.
But to your point, like, we can say like the mind is the most powerful tool, but a lot of people are like, okay, but now what? What does that mean? And that's where I think sports psychologists are so important, because our job is to come in and not just kind of stop with the statement like that, but to actually break down, like, what does that look like and what do I do about it? So an example I commonly like to use with that, Hector, is be where your feet are. I'm sure you've heard that expression at some point. Athletes have that thrown at them all the time. It's a great statement, but a lot of people I work with are like, what does that mean? Like, yes, I know in theory, abstractly, like, okay, I'm supposed to be here. But in the moment when I'm struggling and my mind is going other places, like, how do I come back to the present moment? And so that's where I think we need some help and support to make sure we can kind of make these things explicit and know, like, okay, well, this is what this means for me and how I'm going to go about this. Yeah.
And I feel like in sports, like, you have to be able to be aware of what's going on right now, not what's going to happen in 5 minutes, or not what happened before. Is you can only control what's happening right now.
Oh, that's absolutely.
And it's hard to be able to consider as you're going through a game.
Yes.
Like, dude, I just made a few mistakes. Yes. How am I going to come back? Like, I feel like I need to do more. But in reality, you're not even up to bat, or you don't even have the ball in your hand. Like, you know what I mean?
I absolutely
because
know what you mean.
It's like,
yes,
I need to do something. But like, it's hard for athletes to process that.
And what I would add to that is sometimes, Hector, they don't even realize what they're saying to themselves in those moments. And so I talk to people I work with about that a lot. Like, there's almost like, you know, the old school megaphone that used to like use in PE, right? To like make announcements. We basically have one of those providing commentary in our mind all the time, but we don't maybe explicitly listen to what it's saying. And helping athletes build the ability to understand what that megaphone is shouting at us, essentially. Yeah. And then being able to understand that I don't have to respond to everything it says. Just because I think something doesn't make it true.
Right.
But if I can, again, be aware of what's going on, then all of a sudden I have a choice. I'm not just reacting to the megaphone. I get to say, does this thought help me or does it not? If it doesn't, then what do I need to focus on in the present moment that does serve me? And that's really cool because a lot of people don't realize we have this ability to not be the audience of this megaphone.
Right.
We get to decide to direct it, to turn the volume up or down, whatever we want to do.
Get out the door.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's powerful stuff.
Yeah. Once you can eliminate that, right?
Here's the difference. You're not eliminating it. You're not eliminating it. Instead, you're just becoming aware of it, and you get to decide whether or not you do something about it. And that's what I think a lot of people misunderstand about mindfulness. That's a term you hear a lot in sports psychology. To be mindful is not to be without thoughts or to be without distractions. It's to be aware of what are those thoughts and am I distracted? And when that happens, can I get my reaction time quicker and quicker to come back to notice that and come back to what I'm doing? So and the way I explain that a lot is if I tell you not to think about something, like don't think of a big pink bear.
You're going to think of it.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought of a pink bear as you told me that.
Nice and fluffy in the corner, right? We get this thought rebound effect. So trying to not have a bad day, not have a bad thought doesn't actually work. So instead, if we just change our relationship to our thoughts and we're the one who's observing them instead of just reacting to them, it opens up a whole new way of operating in the world.
Is that you kind of go about it the same way as like controlling emotion in sports? Because you're going to feel that rush, right? Or that feeling when something bad happens or you get excited.
Yes.
Is it kind of the same?
Yes. So I kind of had that pause when you said controlling because in my background, like I kind of see things working a lot from a type of therapy called ACT. So it's acceptance commitment therapy. And ACT is very strong on saying like we don't control our thinking, we don't control our emotions, and our efforts to do so actually cause us more suffering at times. So the alternative to that, instead of controlling, is can I accept what's there and then make a choice that's consistent with my values or how I want to show up? So to your point, yes, like our emotions come up and we need to be able to regulate them. So I talk a lot with players about like their level of physiological arousal or their anxiety in like sport moments, right? Mm-hmm. If we can practice awareness of like, okay, I'm at a 9 and my optimal zone's in this like 4 to 6 range. Like, okay, I can be aware of that. I can accept the anxieties here. How do I now kind of get myself to where I need to be? Do I need to regulate my breathing so my heart rate syncs back up? Do I need to kind of reframe the way I'm looking at my activation and say my body's prepared? I'm meeting the moment. I'm ready to go. Like there's different things we can do, but again, it's more about what choice do I make based on this awareness that I have. And so I work a lot with athletes on knowing, again, like it's not our job to get rid of your emotions. We don't have to get rid of them for you to show up and play great. We just need to make sure you're responding the ways that you choose and you're not reacting to these other kind of stimulus factors. And
like performance anxiety, I'm sure it happens all over the world, right? From not only professional, but obviously, youth kids.
Oh, yes. I have some kiddos that I'm working with right now, honestly, 9, 10, 11, and I've never worked with kids that young before, but they talk about, like, as we get to kind of getting into what they're going through, this awareness that they're holding their breath, they stop breathing because they're so nervous going into practice, not wanting to make a mistake or disappoint a coach. Sometimes they're feeling nauseated, just all these pretty uncomfortable physical experiences. And so, yes, that's present for our young ones too, and helping them understand, okay, well, what's happening? What are the beliefs or thoughts my mind's telling me about what's going to go down today?
Yeah.
And then what can I do to help my body reset itself and to kind of direct my thoughts in a direction where I'm going to actually get to enjoy practice today instead of dreading kind of these feared outcomes in the future, right, that we're not sure are going to happen yet.
It's almost like, because I coached for a while too, it's almost like letting those kids, hey, it's okay. You're going to fail. And it's okay. You're still doing a great job.
Yes.
It's okay. We're going to get better with time.
Yes.
Instead of kind of hammering them at a young age. It's now when I see that, it's hard for me to see things like that just because I've been on the other end and I'm like, it's very, very tough to witness and see something like that without saying something. I'm like, man, leave that poor kid alone. Let him go out and be a kid and have fun and coach him up a little bit. But at the end of the day, I mean, you're doing it for him the right way.
Yes. And they can have fun and be learning, right? Like what I would want parents to see or hear or look for in their young ones is if we have a kiddo who's starting to feel more and more like they need to be a perfectionist, that is a good clue of like, hang on, this is not going to set this kiddo up for success. Because what we see with perfectionism is there's all of a sudden so much failure to make a mistake.
Yeah.
When we are afraid of making a mistake, what do you think happens to our play? We don't actually push ourselves as hard. We want to do things that we're comfortable with. We don't kind of make calculated risks. We become pretty risk averse. And when that happens, we end up playing small, right? So if we aren't failing on the field, especially in practice, and in games it's going to happen too, but practice is the time where we're trying to push past our limit. And if we're not making a mistake, we're not pushing to the limit, right? And so I work a lot with, again,
that's a good point, by the way. That's very good point.
If you, and I work on this with my pros too, like this is universal, but if we can't make room for making some mistakes out there and understanding that that's part of the learning process, it's first of all, you're not having any fun. The joy is gone. But we lose touch with like, what's the point of being here? I can pursue mastery at what I do and make mistakes along the way. And that's a much healthier relationship to saying, I'm mastering this thing. And that's a process that I'm always engaging in. I can fine tune, I can tweak, I can kind of grind at something, but it doesn't have to be perfect to mean that I'm doing a great job.
Yeah. Do you feel like as a practice phase when you're trying to find that limit, like if you do that consistently, obviously you're gonna be able to see it in an actual game.
Yes.
Right.
And I think again what that allows us to do is instead of having this reaction to, oh my God, I just made this error or I had this mistake, it lets us almost look at it through like a coaching lens or a solution lens, which is, okay, this thing happened. We're just observing. We're not judging. It's like, all right, well, what does this tell me about what I need to do to be successful the next time this happens, right? Sometimes we can't figure that out on our own. That's why we have a coach and we can go ask. We can ask like a teammate to kind of say like, hey, watch me on this rep. I'm not sure what's happening. Or we can take a look at ourselves and say like, okay, I'm not set. Like I'm feeling too much pressure. I need to come back to my process. I need to make sure I'm feeling the ball come off my fingertips in this way, whatever it is. But it gets us back into not the, oh my God, I just did this thing that was so embarrassing. And we're into like, okay, this happened. Now what do I want to do?
Yeah. Now you're making me think like a coach, because I'm something after that happens, I want to tell a kid like, hey, find yourself back again. You're okay.
Yeah.
And if you get that, it's like, man, this guy knows what he's talking about.
Yes. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But there's not many people out there that can guide, sports athletes in that direction.
Yes.
At a young age, as far as
I would agree.
At a professional level, that's the stuff you already have to know and mature and catch yourself.
Yes.
And get back to the same element where you can perform.
Yes.
Especially in a pro setting. I mean, that's on a whole different level when you got fans and you got TVs and interviews and all that.
Absolutely.
So as far as you work with a few professional athletes, how do you get those guys to just stay in one lane? Because if you get involved in all that, I feel like it's just a lot of noise on the outside, and it's just you got to stay lined up and focused. I mean, it's hard.
It is. It is a difficult process. And what's so interesting, Hector, about kind of working with pros is they are at the peak of what they do, right? They're exceptional athletes, and we can be working on playing present, and that's something you can work on for months, right? There's little adjustments to make to understand, like, when have I been brought out of my zone that I need to be in mentally to be present. And like we were talking about before, mindfulness isn't never experiencing a distraction, saying when that happens, how do I become aware of it and then redirect myself? And so it's a practice. It's not something you arrive at. And so with the pros, when we are working together, oftentimes we're looking at something that was difficult that came up, or a putt that didn't drop, or like a serve that didn't go in, and being able to say like, okay, I was aware, this is the thought that I had, here we go again. Instead of kind of responding to that thought and going where it's leading, I kind of caught myself. I came back to my process. I went through my breathing routine. I went through like visualizing what I want to do, grounding myself, whatever their skill is. And they're choosing about, again, where do I direct my mind so I can be ready for the most important play, which is the next play.
Yeah. So when you go back to focus, is that like if I have the most focus on something, is there like a science about your heart rate and how calm you are? Because I can imagine, like, if I'm focused, I'm kind of more in a calm environment versus I'm all amped up.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. So there's some like nuance to this, right? Something that I was really fortunate to get to do was to go get a certification in biofeedback. And biofeedback is essentially just a way to say we're using sensors, we're using different kinds of like technology to be able to get a window into what's going on internally. And what's really fascinating about biofeedback is it can give us like some quantitative data on what we know happens essentially when we teach breathing mechanics and how effective that can be. So when I was working with athletes, I had an opportunity, Shauna Estes Taylor at University of Arkansas, she's the women's golf coach. Fantastic program. She's a fantastic person. And she really invested in using practice time to have myself and one other provider come out and do biofeedback with the women on the course, rotating through it, practice and using practice time for that. And in those sessions, what we're doing is we're looking at their breathing rate. And when we start to breathe in a certain way, our heart rate can match up with that. So what people don't realize is our heart rate is not consistent or constant at a certain rate all the time. So like say it's like an average of 60 beats per minute. It's not always going at that pace. What we want to see actually when we're in a better zone is as we breathe in, our heart rate increases, and as we exhale, it decreases.
Oh, okay.
So have you heard of HRV?
No, I haven't.
So like on wearable technology like Whoop bands, Oura rings, like we're getting a lot more opportunities for consumers to kind of look at this HRV metric. And HRV just stands for heart rate variability. So when we are in this zone, when we're breathing effectively, like our heart rate, like I was saying, kind of changes pace. When we're stressed, when we're highly anxious, when we're depressed, we don't see that. It flattens out. Our breathing isn't effective. Most of us are breathing too quickly, too shallow.
Wow.
And so you actually see your breathing has the ability to regulate that heart rate response, and then your brain waves sometimes will change into a certain kind of frequency band, kind of zone that can set us up better for success. I know I'm explaining a lot. I'm nerding out on this stuff, but
that's very good stuff there.
The way that this works when we're training biofeedback in HRV, elite athletes are taking somewhere between 4 to 7 breaths per minute. I say that because that's kind of how we're preparing or getting in the zone to take the field of play. It's going to be hard to do that if you're a basketball player, to take a 10-second breath as you're running up and down the court. So you can be in the zone you need to be while you're at a kind of high demand physically, but mentally there can be a different way to prepare when you're getting ready to go into a game as well. And so a lot of times when I work with athletes, we do the off the field or off the court practice with the breathing so that when they need to take a breath to regulate themselves, it's almost easier to drop back into the pattern because the body knows what you're asking it to do.
So it's like kind of getting comfortable in that feel, I guess. Is it more like a feel, I guess?
Yes. In that feel, and then kind of like riding a bike, your body's like, oh, I know what we're doing.
And it makes it kind of normal to process, right?
And it can be easier to kind of get into that. So when we're in a high demand situation and we're taking a breath to regulate ourselves, our body kind of understands, again, like what we're asking it to do.
Yeah, now that makes a lot of sense.
And a lot of people, and this would be a whole nother topic, Hector, but a lot of people don't breathe effectively at all, even at the pro level. We see a lot of this kind of deep breath, and that's not doing basically anything to help you regulate.
Every time, like now that I'm thinking about it, like I see when you got pitchers that are locked in and mowing hitters down, they'll go to the dugout and they sit down. They're as calm as a book. They're not talking to anybody, but they're just calm and focused. And
I feel like I can't think of his name, but the Astros pitcher, they showed a shot of
Javier during the no hitter, was it?
Yeah, showing him in the dugout, kind of to himself, breathing slowly and
just locked in.
And the important piece with the breathing that not many people realize is the exhale is the really important piece to regulate our like body's activation. And so that would be a whole nother.
Leave that guy alone over there in the dugout.
Let him
he's
doing
whatever he's doing. He's working.
Right
yeah.
Yes.
And that's very hard to do when you got, that's a World Series game. You got thousands of or millions of people watching.
But the thing is, it was not his first time, right? That is his process. That is his preparation. It's probably not as hard to drop into that. There could be the distraction of like, oh my God, I'm throwing a no-hitter. Okay, the thought is there. Is it going to help me to think about that in this moment? No, I need to keep doing my process, my routine, staying within myself. And so then that's where you redirect your attention. But the thoughts about like the fans being nuts or this call was bad or whatever, that's going to inevitably happen. It's just, okay, how do we respond in those moments? How to respond
to all that. Yeah. It's interesting how they go through that.
Oh, yes.
You know, but it's obviously, it doesn't happen overnight.
No. Nope. And so it's not, a lot of sports psychology, effective sports psychology is not glamorous. It's not like a magic wand change. It's something that you invest in. And what's wonderful about it, in my opinion, is the work that you're putting in to prepare yourself to perform well also benefits you and just life in general. So I have a daughter who's 2.5, and I joke with a lot of my sports psychology friends that I'm using the techniques that I teach more than ever, just in trying to be the most effective parent I can be. And in a moment of a tantrum or like the thing right now is she doesn't want to wear pants when we're getting out the door. So like trying to get pants on in the morning is like a negotiation. So trying to be present, trying to like regulate myself. I'm going to use my breathing. I'm using my techniques and
to stay in control.
So we laugh about it, but like these things that we do for sport, they show up in our life and they benefit us in lots of ways.
Yeah. Have awareness.
Yes.
You got awareness. Now you're taking the right action.
Yeah.
You see, I'm learning today.
Yes. Yeah, I can have a thought like, this is ridiculous. We have to wear pants. And yet, that's not going to be effective in getting my daughter to put her pants on. So, all right, let's back up. What else do we need to do?
We're going to wrap it up here shortly, but real quick, before we wrap it up, what are ways that we can athletes, as far as like manage stress, so they're going through some stress and they're not performing the right way, what are some things that they can do to kind of get back to where they once were?
So a way I talk about this with a lot of people initially is like a bucket model. So we can visualize a bucket, and the bucket can only hold so much, right? We have different forms of stress that can pour in our bucket. We can't always control we can't turn off the stress necessarily. Like, okay, homework keeps coming. I still have to put in my hours at practice, whatever it may be. So when our bucket starts to get full, we can sometimes get to this overflow point where all of a sudden our fuse is short, or we're just feeling like we don't want to do anything anymore. We're just constantly feeling kind of overwhelmed and not great. And so that's where we really need to take a look at, how do I drain my bucket? What are things that I do that replenish me? Do I have a feel-good playlist? Do I practice the breathing on my commute to work or the ride to practice? Do I want to make sure that I'm checking in and being, to my point earlier, like, when am I being just Johnny and not the athlete and the student? Can I go hang out with a buddy this weekend? And really making sure that, okay, I can't necessarily control the amounts of stress that are coming into my life, but what can I do to make sure I'm still taking care of myself in that process?
Wow. I feel like a lot of athletes can use that tool for sure.
We need to,
because you're gonna have it. You're gonna get stress at one point in your career. I don't care who you are.
Yes.
I don't care if you're a Hall of Famer. I don't care if you're gonna go through that phase.
Yes. Yes, and sometimes we kind of have to write it out. But what I don't want to see is a lot of times athletes that end up coming to me because it's not working are like kind of keeping the stress, the emotions, the hard things at arm's length. And we put in all this effort to not feeling or not acknowledging it. And I talk about it like it's like holding a basketball underwater, if you've ever done that in a swimming pool. It doesn't want to stay there. It takes energy to keep it under the surface because it wants to erupt and come to the surface. But if we can find ways to not put all this energy into keeping it swept under a rug and let it just be at the surface and kind of deal with it and cope, we're in a much better position to make sure that we're not going to get to an overflow point as often. Yeah.
Is there anything else as far as supporting, the athlete mental health that we didn't get to touch on today that is kind of something that some people need to know? Like sleep or, I know the biggest thing is being you and not necessarily identify yourself as an athlete, but you're also a brother. And
yes, those are big pieces. I kind of pause because we should do a part 2. There's a lot of different things we can talk about. Yeah. But the thing I think I would say is most important is being able to take a step back and looking at like what brings me joy. When I'm at my best, when I play and compete, what does that look like? What are the things that light me up that I get excited about? And like, where am I finding opportunities to connect with those experiences or to set myself up to have those kinds of things? Because like we were talking about, not everybody's going to play at the 1%. We're investing so much time and energy to this pursuit that we want to make sure we're enjoying the journey. And so I would say look for that. Look for the joy. What lights me up about this? Is it connecting with my teammates? Like, my best college memories are not on the field. Like, I can't even remember some of the goals that I've scored, but I remember those locker room celebrations and being so excited with teammates when something big happens. So just, again, taking that bigger picture view of like, what's my why? Why am I doing this? What lights me up about this?
Yeah. It's a lot. With this, you can kind of branch off and talk about so much.
Yes.
But is there a Twitter or maybe a website that the viewers at home can kind of know a little bit more about you, or if they need some services, they can get a hold of you?
Yes. Thanks for asking that. I do have a website. It's DrBlakelyLowScott.com. So just DR, not doctor spelled out. And then my Instagram is where I share most of like reels, content, some kind of topics that I'm seeing come up. And that's my handle for Instagram is Dr.Blakely. So you can find me there, find some free content there. And my website has the information too about how to reach out if you're hoping to connect. Awesome.
Well, Dr. Blakely, I really do appreciate you coming, dropping some great info. You got me on my toes learning. I want to ask for more, but we'll have to sit down and maybe talk and do a part 2 later.
That sounds great.
And kind of get after it and seeking some more information. But thank you for coming once again. You have a blessed day, and
you as well.
We'll go from there.
Sounds good.
All righty, that's a wrap.